All right, folks, Saturday evening quarantine rolls on once again. Back with volume 2. David Jackson, Hall of Famer Steve Brown, Randy Jackson on the Mass General Store sideline. First things first, Brownie, I noticed that you've got a beverage of choice there. What do we got today?
A little banquet beer, Dave and Randy. It'll celebrate a little bit. Second edition of quarantine.
Never remember the banquet beer coming in a green bottle.
Sometimes you got to change it up. Sometimes you can't get to the store, Dave. You got to change it up.
That's quarantine banquet beer right there.
I can't fool you on that, Canna. I can't fool you on that, Canna.
It's been in the bunker so long it's turned. It's like
I always thought those were silver.
We're gonna talk a little landscaping tonight, so you know.
I got you. Green Tom needs a green beer. Dad, what you got up there?
I got a little Joseph's Golden Ale here.
Okay. Shout out to a sponsor of the future, Appalachian Mountain Brewery.
Yep.
We'll try to keep this as original as possible here. We're going with the Rocky Mountain Cold Coors Light.
Classic.
21 means 21. Brownie? How you
Classic.
forget your line after one
It's
freaking
a
show?
banquet beer, Dave.
This is as authentic as it gets right now. This is where Brownie says.
It's a banquet beer.
There we go. Okay. Now we can start. That's kind of like the toast of Saturday evening quarantine.
Wow.
If Brownie doesn't say banquet beer, we can't start. So, overwhelmed with the response from this. We had like 600 views on this thing last week. So, can tell y'all are a little bored. But it was fun to get together, and we got a few new segments for the post game show this time around. But Brownie, what you been up to this week, man?
Well, this week, Dave's been a lot of online training. I'm getting tired of the WebExes and the Zoom meetings, but all you can do, anybody that's outside, we can still call on the outside customers. So anybody's got work going on, and most of the contractors that I call on are still working, trying to stay, 6 feet apart and do their deal. But most guys are still pretty busy. So that's been a good thing. Been doing a lot of online training and, doing a lot of stuff at home and then on the road, just only on the outside. We're not calling on inside customers to their offices and anything, putting a lot of pressure on them.
Brownie, I know that you had to social distance from Beasley quite a bit back in the day. Has that transition been good for you?
Yeah, it's been really good. You caught me off guard on that one.
I gotcha. Dad, your week? Anything?
Well, let's see. It's gone from dodging tornadoes to some nice bike rides, mowing the lawn. After we got rid of the tornadoes and storms, the weather was really pretty nice. Today was beautiful outside. I didn't have any classes to teach this week. That starts up again next week, so it was relatively quiet.
Well, good. Well, some folks have taken the opportunity to apparently send us in some gardening tips on the moles. We found out through our fan base in Western North Carolina are quite the problem. Brownie, you'll like the best suggestion was to, and this was after the rain the other day when we had the big rain. Our neighbor across the street, and I'm not making this up. I swear I'm not. One of the moles drowned in one of the holes.
Oh,
so
no.
There was a suggestion. There was a suggestion that we take the mole and put it in one of the other holes to kind of show, what happens when you come to the outside.
Give them more respect.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but in light of the mole, the mole controversy and ultimate outreach, we thought that we would take the opportunity to bring on a new segment to the show. For those of you that watched us back in the day, you know that we always were impressed by our good friend Brian Estridge, who is the former voice of the Mountaineers back, right about the time radio came out, actually, I think is when Brian was in that role. And Brian has moved on. He is in Texas, and he has a fantastic yard. His yard is definitely Augusta quality. So we are going to bring a new segment to you this week, and it is called, it's not called anything right now because the image is removed itself. So there we go. Technical difficulties. It is called Yard Like Brian's. This is actually Brian Estridge's yard. right here. If you were at his house currently, that's what it would look like. So, Brownie, I challenge you to come up with a yard tip or two this week.
Do you
What
remember
do
the
got?
first time? You remember the first time I called you, told you that Brian sent me a picture of his backyard, and I called you and I said, "You got to see this thing, man. It's amazing." I said he's had to spend 50 or 60 G's on this yard, and I start talking about, what do you do here? What do you do here? It had all the tip for you. You got to lay a good ground cover over before you put the mulch down. You got to do this. You got to do that. I said, Brian, don't BS me. Who'd you pay to do this? But it's amazing. Yard like Brian.
He really did have more bonsai trees in that thing than a Karate Kid backlot.
It was amazing. Of course, we've given him quite hell over the last 6 or 7 years of it.
We have. So do you have any garden tips? Anything for us?
I'm really in the doghouse right now, David and Randy, because last week I got the old crossbow, mixed it with a little water, and I got a customer who's got a country store, landscaping supplies. Went there, said, I need to kill some weeds. Got what you need, crossbow. You mix about 4 ounces in every gallon, and I've killed everything Teresa's put out. I killed all the herbs.
The tomatoes, everything, huh?
It's not been good.
You can't
He
kill
said,
the
don't
baby.
you know, stay in the gravel. You need to stay in the gravel. I was all in the mulch and everything.
I bet
So
those
that's my
rocks are
tip.
brittle.
Stay in the gravel is my tip.
Dad, that's why his bottle's green. He sprayed some of that on there, and it turned it from brown to green.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. When you were talking about the moles a little while ago, I was just going to ask. No one from PETA was watching the show last week, so we won't get any complaints from PETA people about killing the moles. I hope that's the case at least.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a yard tip for you.
What's that?
And this one I've really actually seen work. Most people, I was watching my neighbor mow his lawn tonight. Most people mow their lawns way too short. And when there's heat stress or when there's a kind of a drought that sets in, the root system, when you mow your lawn real short, doesn't, it's not allowed to grow. So I've been told to leave your lawn, set your lawnmower at the highest setting, let the yard grow. The grass should be about 4 inches tall, and you'll develop a really deep root system in it. So when you get those times of stress, either drought or heat, the lawn does a much better job because the roots are down deeper. How about that?
I used to actually practice that in your yard back in the day
You
when
did?
I was mowing it. I just didn't mow for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I said, "Hey, we're trying to deepen the root system." You didn't buy that.
Well, you did do
Way
a
ahead
very
of
good
your
job
time,
of that.
buddy.
I'm trying to deepen my root system here too. I've got the we're up to about a category 5 on the haircut here. So
Well, that's the one thing I like about this lock-in so far. I have more hair now than I've had in a long time.
all right. Well, if you've got any garden tips for us, send them in, and maybe you can be featured on next week's Yard Like Brian. Now, before we get to the videotape this week, we've got one more thing. We were encouraged to share some stories from the road last week. That prompted more phone calls from people that we used to work with saying, "Hey, I understand you guys are going to share some stories. Don't share this one, this one, this one, or this one." So we had to comb through what we did have left, and that brings us stories from the road. And yes, that's Reggie Jackson. And Brownie and I were reminiscing on this story earlier this week when I was telling him about this particular story again. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of all the details because this was a while ago. So, Brownie, this was what? This is 2004. This was your first year back with us. You were a sideline.
2004, that's correct.
2004, we go to Wyoming. We're in Laramie, Wyoming. And that was the game. That was the debut of Appalachian's spread offense. That was that first game. And Wyoming beat App by about 400 points in the hail the next day. But we got to Laramie, and we went out for a steak dinner. And if you were on that trip, you know that once you got outside of Laramie, I mean, it was like being on the plane. I mean, it was nothing around. So it was one of those things. We get a tip from one of the members of the travel squad that say, "Hey, if you want a steak, you guys have got to go out to this place and get this steak." Well, so we travel. I mean, I think we passed Michael Landon's house from Little House on the Prairie on the way out there, man. It was a ways. So we get out to this steak place, and sure enough, it looked like an old barn that had been turned into a restaurant, and it was really nice on the inside and everything. So we go in there. We're gonna go get our steak dinner. Well, we are sitting in this restaurant, and probably about, I don't know, Brian, it was about 4 or 5 tables over.
Yeah, about 3 or 4 tables. Yeah.
So there's a guy who is a spitting image of Reggie Jackson.
Mr. October.
Mr. October was in Laramie, Wyoming, for some reason the night before at Place Wyoming in the 2004 season opener. So we were with Mike Flynn, who we talked about last week. Mike Flynn was sports information director, and he, of all people, huge Yankees fan, thoroughly convinced this was Reggie Jackson without a question. So we all sit around this table, eating our steak and staring at this guy for the better part of probably about 45 minutes or so. I mean, it was probably awkward for him. It was certainly, we were starstruck, so we just didn't care. So we finally get up the nerve. We can tell he's getting ready to leave. And we finally get up the nerve. We're going to go talk to Reggie. We got to talk to Reggie Jackson. So as we are getting up like this, Reggie starts to get up. And when Reggie stood up, he was only about 5'2".
At best.
Not Reggie Jackson, and we bailed out. We took the ball and threw it out of bounds and moved on to second down.
Did Mike Flynn melt?
Mike, I think he audibly gasped, actually. I think he was like, that's not Reggie Jackson. But so, go ahead, Brownie.
He was crushed.
Oh, it totally was. Totally was. And so we watched this guy walk out of the restaurant barely above table height, and thought he was Mr. October for a while. So and then afterward, because when you're in that situation, you never think logically. So we sit there the rest of the meal, and we're like, now why would Reggie Jackson have been in Laramie anyway? So it's fairly a heck of a Labor Day weekend card show.
You're sure he didn't know that you guys were watching him and walked out on his knees?
He might have. I think he would have actually been shorter had that been the case. But yeah, so that's our tales from the road this time. Again, we have to edit most of those stories for content. Now, I do remember that, Brownie, you rode a mechanical bull that night.
Yes, I did.
Are you suffering any long-term effects from that?
Well, the hamstring is still a bit tight.
Oh, the hamstring.
The story was, I think, was Jay on that trip, David? Was Jay
Jay Sutton, yeah.
Jay was there.
Yeah, Jay was there.
Mark
Drabowitz was there.
He was still there. Beasley was there. And what prompted me, Beasley got on there and got thrown off in about 3 seconds. And I said, that's the most unathletic thing I've ever seen. He said, well, you get back on there. So, of course, I went over, had a couple of banquet beers and jumped on there. And so after 10 seconds, the buzzer goes off. I think I'm going to do a Mary Lou Retton dismount. What I forgot is they had about a 2-foot cushion, and then they had the floor. So I'm coming off there with my dismount, and I braced to hit the floor and hit the cushion. Then I relaxed, and then my hamstring felt like somebody shot me. I went right over to the bartender and asked him, I need 2 more Miller Lights. At that time, it was Miller Lights. And you remember I got the ice pack and put on the back of my hamstring.
He said, I need 2 Miller Lights and 2 bags of ice.
Those hammies are tough, aren't they?
Well, the funny thing is so we're playing Northwestern State a few weeks later that same year. And that was another game. I think App was down 35-0 at halftime and came back and almost won the game. Hans Batishon was ruled out of bounds on a play at the end that he wasn't out of bounds on. But anyway, so we're getting smacked in Natchitoches, Louisiana. It's like 400 degrees, and Brownie's still limping around with the hammy. So we look down there, and Avery All's still doing color with me at the time. And Avery and I look down there during a commercial break, and he kind of elbows me. He's like, is Brownie sitting down in a chair? And he pulled this like straight out of a 3rd grade classroom chair and set it up next to the goalpost. It was just chilling down there like he was on the beach.
I had to rest. I was tired.
Between the hamstring and the lack of potassium from all the sweat that was dripping off. You were.
I have one Wyoming question. When y'all left the restaurant and went back to the hotel, did Kelsey Sharkey get you lost in the stagecoach?
Luckily, Sharkey was only about 10, but I'm sure she was getting lost somewhere at that point in time. That'll be one of our next stories is how Kelsey Sharkey could turn a 3-minute trip into a 35-minute odyssey driving around suburban Detroit. All right, so that's Tales from the Road. If you've got any specific asks, send them to us, and maybe we'll get to them. Final thing for Saturday evening quarantine, it's really kind of in defense of the dog Ozzy, who was really worn out by Clover last week in the backyard scrum. So we've got some additional footage here that's come to us from our network partners, and we'll be able to check out. This is Ozzy prior to Big Walk through the neighborhood. And there they go. Ozzy again, the fluffy dog, and Clover, the smaller dog. And already we see breakaway speed here, Brownie.
I tell you what, Ozzy's been in the anabolic stages, doing a little fartlek training, as he used to call it. Look at she's working on her stride. Look at that stride.
There's a horse field over in this general vicinity here, and I think she's been watching them run. Well,
you also notice the blue sky. Nice. There's some sunshine out. You know, the warmer weather really these animals really get limber, and they're like athletes love it in the warm weather, so they can really go at it, getting all warmed up.
I kind of like the. I'm gonna roll back here for just a second and just kind of point out here. As we redirect the attention back this way after the cut, I think there's a pretty nice form tackle coming.
That's right.
Actually, maybe I didn't go back far enough. Now we're coming out of the garden here. Clover is a huge fan of whatever Leela is planting in that first garden box. But I think we can go back here. Let's see, we got it. Oh yeah, see we got good vertical movement here. Clover on the attack, and then we've got the form tackle right there.
Wow.
So Ozzy may have taken this round. We'll see if we get anything further. Brownie, any?
I see a little snarl on Ozzy there, man. I'll tell you, really fired up there.
I think Ozzy's pride was hurt last week.
Well, and I think the wet track, we had about 6 inches of rain at the house on Sunday. And I think the wet track definitely helped Ozzy's general balance this time around.
How about the cow patties? They still there?
The mole holes actually sunk in. You might have noticed part of that footage. There is such a connection of mole holes. We actually have like a bubbling brook of water in one of them that just every time it rains, all the water rushes down and gets in that system, and we've got us a geyser. We're going to sell admission.
Guys, yard like
Old
David.
Faithful. You don't need to go to
Like
Grandfather Mount. We got Old Faithful up here. So
it's not natural. So you got to sell that as natural spring water coming out of there.
Comes in a green bottle. It'll be great. It'll be great. So, all right. So as we close, any parting shots? We'll go around and good game, bad game. What do we got?
No, good game. I thought the stories were great. I wasn't on that Wyoming trip. That was before my time, so it's kind of fun to hear that. I just have this picture. I'll probably have this picture in my mind tonight of Brownie on the bull pulling the hammy. That's a big one.
He translated Beasley a lot clearer than I remember that conversation going down. That was more like, "Here, get there."
What year did you come into the fold, Randy? What year was it?
Oh, 2006, I think.
Yeah, that's right. NC State.
I remember you.
Yep, NC State was my first. Man, talk about being scared to death. Woo, that was something. That was the day Trey Elder went and was losing his cookies before the game started on the sidelines, and I thought, what am I getting myself into?
Every time I think about that game, every time we got the balls like on the 3 or 4 yard line.
Yep.
Field position was brutal. I mean, they did a great job pinning us down. And, I mean, I felt bad for Trey. 1st and 10 at the 3, at the 4, at the 5. I mean, it was crazy how the field position that game worked out.
I think if that game was 2 weeks later, App would have won it by about 20.
Yeah. We did. It was almost, you start off 1st and 10 and you're playing a pretty good team in North Carolina State, and they're pretty good defensively. Well, we had some weapons, but it's almost like, your back's against the end zone the whole first half, and you got to be rather conservative with Trey at that point, not knowing, how comfortable he was and breaking in. I think it is at that time a lot of young receivers. So, I mean, as far as game planning, I didn't have a problem with the play calling, but it's just, I think the average starting field position that first half was like the 11-yard line. It was crazy.
No, you're right. It was horrible.
If I remember right, too, didn't Daniel Bettis play defensive end in that game also? Wasn't that in that part of 06 where they were messing around with him being a tight end and a defensive line player?
Yeah, I think you're right. I was sitting there thinking today, like some of the players that had breakout years, and then some years you felt like they were underutilized. I mean, I think of the running back, Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
We're sitting there in the booth saying, get this guy the ball 25 or 30 touches a game. I think he was a kid that came in from junior college, and he was a player.
Tavares Cadet, probably the same way.
Yeah.
What came into my mind this week that was really strange was, do you all remember, I think it was in Montana, if I remember right. Do you remember the hit that Matt Klein took?
Oh, yeah.
I saw a picture of Matt Klein this week on a social media thing, and that popped into my mind. And how that guy ever got up from that hit, I have no idea.
I'm sure Matt's flattered by that every time. When you see him, you're just thinking about him getting blasted.
Oh, well, I mean, that was one of the biggest hits I think I've seen in the years I was
We had
doing
so
it.
much frost on our window, we couldn't see because Brown was determined to have the window open the whole night.
They would open that door, and it's like a wind tunnel. That's the coldest I've ever been in my life.
It's a rule. You could never have if there was a window that could open, it didn't matter what the temperature was.
Now, keeping in mind that you two guys are talking about this while you're sitting inside and I'm outside in the blowing snow, and the sidelines were so tight there, we couldn't walk from one end to the other. So at each half, you had to pick the area that you were going to be in, and you had to stay there. You couldn't walk through the benches.
Well,
and, oh, man, standing there with that wind blowing was just absolutely brutal.
Well, I always felt bad for the folks at Montana because I know that Tim Sparks nearly bankrupted them with that 1940 space heater that he brought in there. Probably drew more power than any substation in Missoula. It had two settings. It had off and surface of the sun. And Brown was hugged up around that thing like he was riding a mechanical bull.
A couple of times I looked down and see if my shoe was on fire.
Look at all the good things we have to talk about in the weeks to come.
Oh, man. Just getting started. Well, fellas, banquet beers in your direction. If I can get it in the screen there. I guess if we get some feedback again, anybody wants us to break out any new stories, if you've got some video you'd like us to break down, if you think your dog is as fast as Ozzy and Clover, we can put them side by side and run the footage and get the telestrator back out.
Yeah, missed the telestrator this week. You need to break that back out.
I do. Well, we can't bring it all at one time. We gotta phase it. We had graphics this week. Something had to go. And if you would like a yard like Brian Estridge, send a self-addressed stamped envelope along with $7.95 to Scott's Turf Builder, Sheriff Steve Brown, Suburban Asheville. All right. Well, thanks for watching Saturday Evening Quarantine. Maybe we'll be back again if you actually watch this time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Adios.